started with silence. Not the kind that follows an argument. Not even the awkward kind after bad news. No, this was practiced silence. Two people trying not to say the wrong thing because the wrong thing had already been done. My wife and her mother came back from their healing getaway 3 days ago. I was supposed to pick them up from the airport, but they said they'd already booked a car. Too much luggage, she said. But when they arrived, there was no luggage. Just 2 backpacks, 2 tired faces, and one mutual glance that said don't ask. I didn't ask. Not until the next morning, when my wife stood in the kitchen stirring her coffee so slowly, it looked like she was waiting for it to give her answers. Did something happen? I asked. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She just said, we might need to go see someone. At first, I thought she meant a therapist. I hoped she meant a therapist. But then her mother, Roz, emerged from the hallway, pale as salt, and said, we've already booked the appointment. Tomorrow. Not we might, not we'll think about it. Already booked. Already planned. I offered to come. Roz declined. My wife said nothing. Just looked at the floor. I should have insisted. But I didn't. Instead, I made another call that afternoon, to Leonard, my father-in-law. Roz's husband. A man who rarely spoke more than 6 words at a time, but whose face twisted oddly when I told him the situation. Tomorrow? He asked. They're both going? Yeah, I said. Together. Same doctor. He paused. Then, in the softest voice I've ever heard from him, pick me up at 9. We're going too. We didn't tell them we were coming. We waited in the car until we saw them enter the clinic. Leonard wore sunglasses like he was spying for the CIA. I sat there gripping the wheel like it was going to float away if I let go. Then we followed. The clinic was small. Old chairs. Magazines no one reads. The receptionist gave us a tired look but said nothing when Leonard asked to sit in the waiting area. We waited and waited. 20 minutes passed before a door down the hall cracked open. We weren't supposed to hear what we heard. We weren't supposed to be there, but the hallway echoed. And sometimes, secrets don't care who's listening. We heard Roz's voice first. She said she didn't remember everything. Just the hotel and then the doctor. It matches the timeline. And the symptoms. My heart dropped. Leonard turned to me, his jaw tightening. Then my wife's voice. Shaky. Controlled. I can't tell him. If he ever finds out, he'll never forgive me. We didn't move. We didn't breathe. And just like that, the air in that cheap beige hallway became poisoned. Whatever happened on that trip, it wasn't just a weekend away. It was something else. Something that would change everything. The ride home from the clinic was dead quiet. Leonard sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, eyes forward, lips pressed into a line that never broke. I kept glancing at him, hoping he'd say something, anything, to confirm that what we heard wasn't as bad as it sounded. But he didn't. He just stared out the window, like he was watching the wreckage of a train that hadn't stopped crashing yet. When I pulled up to his house, he didn't get out right away. He turned to me and said, I don't think she'll tell you, but you need to ask her anyway. I nodded like I understood. I didn't. I had a dozen theories, each one worse than the last, and none of them prepared me for what came next. Back at our place, the house was too clean. My wife always cleaned when she was nervous, but this was beyond her usual ritual. Everything sparkled. There wasn't a dish in the sink or a blanket out of place. But the house didn't feel right. Felt hollow, as if all the warmth had been vacuumed out. I found her in the guest bathroom. Door closed. Not locked. I could hear soft sobs behind it, quiet and controlled, like someone crying into a towel. I knocked lightly. Faye. Silence. I heard something at the clinic. Please, just talk to me. Still nothing. I stood there for another minute, heart thudding so loudly it drowned out everything else, then walked away. I wanted to break the door down. I wanted to scream, but instead, I curled up on the couch and waited. Felt like hours passed. At some point, I must have dozed off. I woke up to the sound of a drawer closing. Faye stood by the kitchen counter, glass of water in hand, her hair pulled back, her eyes puffy but strangely calm. I need you to not ask me questions tonight, she said flatly. Just tonight. That line, just tonight, was like a hook in my chest. She didn't say, I'll explain tomorrow, or I promise to talk to you. Just a temporary freeze, like we were in some limbo where time didn't count and nothing had to make sense yet. I nodded. I hated myself for nodding, but I did. She went to bed early. I stayed up, scrolling through my phone, rereading texts from her during the trip, looking for clues. There weren't any. Just shallow check-ins, pictures of a mountain view, a blurry bonfire. In one photo, Roz had her arm around Faye, both of them smiling. But it didn't look real. Their smiles were the kind you fake for someone else's benefit. Not because you're happy, but because you're supposed to be. I zoomed in, hoping for something, anything that would unlock whatever they were hiding. But all I saw were two women who looked like they were trying too hard to look normal. Eventually, I went to bed. She was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay there next to her, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was sharing a bed with a stranger wrapped in my wife's skin. And then, at 3:12 a.m., I woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. She had forgotten to mute it. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. All it said was, "Did you tell him?" She didn't respond. She just rolled over and clutched her pillow tighter. I lay there with my eyes wide open, heart pounding, knowing deep down, whatever happened on that trip, I wasn't supposed to find out. But now I had no choice. The morning after that text, I watched her move through the house like everything was normal, like she hadn't received a cryptic message at 3 a.m. asking if she told me something that, apparently, I wasn't meant to know. She made coffee, she fed the cat, she even asked if I wanted eggs. I said no, couldn't eat. I could barely swallow the growing panic in my throat. I kept waiting for her to bring it up, to give me something, but nothing came. Not a word about the clinic. Not a single mention of what the doctor said behind that half-open door. I thought about confronting her, waving her phone in front of her face and demanding answers, but that's not who I am. I've never been confrontational. I get quiet. I overthink. I convince myself I might have misunderstood. That's what I did then. I told myself maybe the message wasn't about me. Maybe it was a friend asking about something entirely different. But then I remembered her voice. If he ever finds out, he'll never forgive me. That sentence wasn't vague. It wasn't up for interpretation. It was guilt, raw and cold. And once you hear something like that, you can't unhear it. Leonard called me that afternoon. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask what happened. He just said, "She's hiding something, and so is Roz. Do you want my help or not?" I said yes before I could even think. His idea was simple. Check Roz's phone records. Leonard still had access to her family account. Said she never changed the login info. I didn't ask how he knew that. Honestly, I didn't care. Within an hour, we were sitting in his garage, 2 folding chairs, 1 old laptop, and the sound of the water heater ticking in the background like a time bomb. He pulled up the call log. The retreat in Maine was supposed to be 6 days. Roz had made 27 calls during that time. 3 of them were to Faye, even though they were together. 5 were to a number saved as Dan. I asked who Dan was. Leonard said, "No idea." Roz never mentioned a Dan. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was a call on the 3rd night of the trip. 1:42 a.m. 46 minutes long. Roz had called my wife's ex, Brandon. I hadn't heard that name in years. He was the guy before me, the one who broke her heart in college. The one she said taught her what not to want. I'd never met him, but I knew about him. How could I not? He was the ghost that still lingered behind certain songs and stories she never fully finished telling. Why would Roz call him? In the middle of the night? From a retreat in another state? And for nearly an hour? My hands started to shake. Leonard noticed. "Whatever this is," he said quietly, "you need to prepare yourself." I didn't sleep again that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined Faye in some cabin, late at night, whispering into Roz's phone while her mother watched the door. Or worse, not just whispering. Meeting him, seeing him, reconnecting in ways I couldn't imagine without losing my mind. By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until Faye got out of the shower, hair dripping, wrapped in a towel, and I asked her straight out, "Why did your mom call Brandon?" Her eyes didn't widen. Her mouth didn't fall open. She didn't gasp or deny it. She just stood there for a few seconds, staring at me like she'd been expecting the question. Then she said, "How do you know about that? Not why does it matter or that didn't happen. Just, how do you know?" That's when I realized I'd barely scratched the surface. She didn't deny it. She didn't even try. When I asked why her mother had called Brandon during their trip, she just stood there in a damp towel, water dripping from her hair onto the floor, and said, "How do you know that?" Like it was my knowing that was the problem, not the secret call to the ex she swore she'd buried 10 years ago. I couldn't speak at first. My throat tightened. My brain scrambled to find the right question. One that would get her to confess or explain, or at least make me feel less insane. But all I managed was, "What's going on, Faye?" She sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly small, vulnerable, like the weight of what she had to say was physically crushing her. I thought I was ready for anything in that moment. I thought maybe she'd admit to texting him, maybe a phone call or two, a lapse in judgment. I could deal with that, I thought. But what she said next felt like someone reached inside my chest and ripped something loose. She said, "I didn't know he was going to be there until we arrived. Roz planned it." I blinked. "What do you mean, be there? He was in Maine?" She nodded slowly. "Roz found him on some website, one of those reunion-type things." She said I needed closure, that I needed to face the part of myself that still hadn't fully healed. Closure. That word. That stupid, overused, cowardly word people use when they want to crack a door open without admitting they're looking for a way out. "I didn't want to see him," she continued, "but when we got there, he was already checked into the cabin across from ours. Roz told me it was all arranged. She said I had to do this before we could move on as a family." Family. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. This wasn't a family retreat. It was a setup, an ambush, and somehow my wife, the woman who used to flinch at the mention of Brandon's name, had stayed in a remote resort with him for nearly a week. I asked the question I didn't want to ask. "Did you see him? Alone?" She hesitated. That tiny flicker of hesitation was enough. "I talked to him," she said softly. "Twice. Once during a hike, once by the fire pit. It wasn't planned. He was just there." "And the doctor?" I asked. "What was that about? What were you all whispering about?" She froze. For a second, her face went completely blank, like someone had yanked the plug on whatever excuse she was about to give. "It's nothing," she said a little too quickly. "Just some health concerns. Nothing serious." I stared at her. She looked down. That's when I knew. There was more. I left the house. I didn't even grab my keys. I just walked. Down the street, past the park, through the neighborhood like a man trying to outpace his own thoughts. I called Leonard again. Told him everything. The retreat. Brandon. The closure. He didn't say much. But before hanging up, he muttered, "Check the cabin invoice." I stopped walking. "What?" "Every guest gets an itemized breakdown. Find it. If she spent time alone with him, it'll be there." I rushed home. Faye was in the shower again. I slipped into her suitcase, the one she'd stashed in the closet. Nothing in the side pockets, but folded between two scarves, I found it. The invoice. 2 guests. 2 nights. 1 cabin. Separate from her reservation with Roz. My hands went numb. I sat on the floor, the paper shaking in my grip, and reread the words over and over again until the letters blurred. My wife didn't just see her ex. She stayed with him, overnight, and she thought I would never find out. The invoice trembled in my hand as I sat frozen on the carpet, surrounded by silence so thick it made my ears ring. I must have read the line about the 2-night stay with Brandon 20 times. Each word chipped away at whatever was left of the person I used to be. Cabin number 14. Check-in, Tuesday night. Check-out, Thursday morning. Occupants, F. Branner, B. Coyle. No mention of Roz. No mention of therapy sessions. Just them. Alone. For 2 nights. And suddenly, all those awkward silences since she came home made perfect sense. The detachment. The way she stirred her coffee like she was hypnotized. The tears behind the bathroom door that weren't from guilt, but from panic. Panic that I might learn the truth. I didn't even realize she'd gotten out of the shower until I heard her voice behind me. "What are you doing?" I turned around, still holding the paper. I wanted to shout, demand, break something, but all I could do was whisper, "Did you honestly think I wouldn't see this?" Her eyes dropped to the invoice, and just for a second, her whole body sagged, like she was too tired to keep the mask on anymore. She stepped back, leaning against the wall, wrapped in her towel again, like some twisted déjà vu from the morning before. "I didn't sleep with him," she said. Her voice cracked slightly, but there was no outrage, no fire, no effort to convince me. Just exhaustion. Like that one sentence had been practiced and polished so much it had nothing left. "You stayed in a cabin. For 2 nights. With him. I told you. It wasn't planned." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing I could do to stop myself from crying. "So you just accidentally shared a private cabin with your ex, while your mother played puppet master from across the fire pit?" "I didn't want it to happen," she said. I told her no. I told him no. "But Roz," she said, "I owed it to myself. She said closure was necessary." "She's your mother, not your spiritual guide," I snapped. "You still made a choice." Her silence was answer enough. I stood up, held out the invoice, and shook it. "So what happened in that cabin, Faye? Did you talk about old times? Did you hold hands and cry about what could have been? Or did you do what I think you did and hope I'd never find out?" She didn't look at me, not once. Instead, she sank onto the bed, wrapped her arms around her knees, and stared at the floor like it might swallow her whole. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she said quietly. "I didn't think I'd come back and hate myself this much." That wasn't a denial. That wasn't a clarification. That was a confession wrapped in cowardice. A whisper that screamed louder than any words could. I left the room, not because I couldn't handle the truth, but because I knew if I stayed, I'd say something I couldn't take back. And even though she betrayed me, even though she dismantled everything we'd built with the flick of a match, some part of me still wanted to believe there was a reason. That maybe this wasn't what it looked like. But I also knew this, Faye had made a choice. And now I had to make one too. Later that night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I texted Brandon. His number was still saved in an old thread from a time years ago when he accidentally messaged her phone late one night and I responded instead. He replied within minutes, and his answer was short, but it was enough to turn my stomach inside out. "She told me you already knew." I stared at the message from Brandon, frozen, as if reading it again might change the words. "She told me you already knew." Not "she thought you knew" or "she was going to tell you." No, past tense, definitive, intentional. She told him that her husband, me, was somehow already in on it. Like my silence, my inaction, my weak, pitiful acceptance of her distance meant permission. As if not knowing meant agreeing. I didn't reply, couldn't. I locked my phone and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the clock on the wall ticking far too loudly for a house that felt like it had stopped. Faye was in the kitchen. I could hear the clink of dishes, the soft murmur of her humming. Humming, as if she hadn't just turned my reality inside out. What kind of person did that? What kind of person plays the role of a healing wife while setting fire to the trust you'd built over a decade? The humming stopped. Her footsteps padded softly down the hall. I didn't move. When she peeked into the bedroom and saw me sitting there, phone in hand, she paused. Her expression didn't shift. Not guilt, not fear, not even anger. Just blankness. A woman too deep in her own unraveling to fake empathy anymore. "I know you're hurting," she said carefully. "I know this is all hitting you hard. But I swear to you, it wasn't what you think." I tilted my head. "Then explain the message. Explain why he said you told him I already knew. Did you think I'd never speak to him? Did you think I'd just sit here and fade?" Her lip trembled slightly, but she didn't cry. Faye never cried when it mattered. I panicked, she finally admitted. That night in the cabin, he asked if you knew about us. I didn't want to explain the situation. I didn't want to look like the bad person. I said you already knew, that we'd worked through it. And what exactly was there to work through? The question hung in the air like poison gas. She sat down across from me, finally facing me, and for the first time since this started, she told the truth. He kissed me. My heart dropped, but she wasn't done. I let him. I didn't stop him. I didn't push him away. And for a few seconds I wanted it. I wanted to feel that thrill again. Not because I love him, not because I want him back, but because I didn't know who I was anymore. I let the moment happen and I didn't think about you. Not once. It wasn't a physical punch, but it may as well have been. My chest collapsed inward, and I couldn't breathe. She looked away when she said it, her eyes glassy, but her voice was steady. I told myself it would fix something broken inside me, she continued. But all it did was break more. You're only sorry now because you got caught. I'm sorry, she whispered. Because I didn't think you'd ever be strong enough to find out. That sentence shattered everything. That's what she thought of me, that I'd stay small, that I'd keep my head down, that I'd keep playing the quiet, forgiving fool while she went out and experimented with nostalgia and called it healing. I stood up, hands shaking. You weren't just dishonest. You were cruel. You let me make you breakfast while you were figuring out how to hide the worst thing you've ever done. She didn't respond. She didn't chase me. She didn't beg. She just sat there. And that silence was louder than any confession. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the words echoing in my skull on a cruel loop. I didn't think you'd ever be strong enough to find out. It wasn't just betrayal, it was underestimation. She hadn't just stepped outside our marriage. She'd stepped over me like I was something limp and predictable. I kept replaying the look on her face when she said it, the eerie calm, like I had proven her wrong too late to matter. By morning, I decided I needed more than her broken version of the truth. I needed to understand just how deep this went. If Roz had planned the reunion, then there had to be a trail, and my gut told me it started with Roz, not Faye. So I went to Leonard's. He opened the door in a flannel shirt, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept either. She finally told you, huh? He muttered. I nodded. Some of it. Leonard poured us coffee and pulled out a folder from his den. I didn't know what I'd find, he said. But I started digging after that visit to the clinic. Roz doesn't lock her emails. He slid the folder across the table. I opened it, expecting receipts or a few messages. What I found made my hands go cold. There were printouts of email chains between Roz and someone with the address Brandon_Silly@fmail.com. Subject lines like, retreat schedule, quiet location secured, and make sure she's alone that night. Dozens of messages. Roz had planned the meetup, reserved the cabin, suggested they bump into each other naturally, even mentioned Faye's favorite wine. She orchestrated the entire thing. I said, barely able to breathe. Leonard nodded slowly. She never liked you, said Faye, settled. I swallowed the lump in my throat. So she lured her own daughter into a healing weekend, just to reopen a door that was supposed to be bolted shut forever? She always thought Brandon was more her type, he said. Smart, charming, ambitious. You were safe. It hit me like a truck. I was never supposed to know. Not just about the cabin or the kiss or the lie to Brandon. I was never supposed to matter in their version of events. I was just a placeholder until my wife rediscovered the version of herself Roz believed she'd lost. That night, Faye came home from work like nothing had happened. She set her keys down, greeted the cat, and walked past me on the couch without a word. I followed her into the kitchen and placed the folder on the counter. She froze. What's this? Your mother's correspondence, I said. With Brandon. About you. She flipped through it silently, eyes scanning faster with each page. Her hands started to tremble. She set you up, I said. But you didn't stop it. You didn't stop her. Her shoulders sagged. and for the first time in days, she looked genuinely afraid. I didn't know she. Don't. I cut in. Don't insult both of us. You said you didn't plan it. But she did. And you went along with it right down to the wine. She pressed her palm to her forehead. I thought it would be harmless. I didn't think it would go that far. But it did. I snapped. And you never intended to tell me. She looked up, eyes wet. What do you want me to say? The truth. All of it. Not just the scraps you've rehearsed. She opened her mouth, closed it again. And that silence? That was all the answer I needed. That night I didn't sleep in our bed. I didn't sleep at all. I stayed up replaying every moment of our marriage. Every trip, every holiday, every quiet Sunday morning that now felt retroactively poisoned. But somewhere between 3 a.m. and sunrise I realized something. I'd been mourning a version of her that didn't exist anymore. Maybe never did. The next morning I packed a single duffel bag. Just enough to get me through a week. When Faye woke up and saw me by the door, she didn't panic. She didn't plead. She just stood there in silence. That same broken calm she'd worn since the lie started to crack. I'm not leaving to punish you, I said. I'm leaving to protect myself. She nodded slowly, a tear finally slipping down her cheek. Do you hate me? No, I said honestly. But I can't love someone who looked at our life and decided it was something to step away from, even for a second. I deserve more than being safe. I want to be someone's choice, not their fallback. For the first time, her face crumbled. Not because she was losing me, but because she knew I'd finally found myself. I moved in with a friend for a few weeks. Leonard checked in on me every few days. Oddly enough, it brought us closer. Two quiet men, both blindsided by the women we trusted most. We started going on walks, talking about things we'd never dared say aloud. I think we both needed it more than we admitted. Faye filed for separation first. I didn't contest it. There were no dramatic court battles, no angry voicemails, just paperwork and silence. It was almost poetic how quietly everything ended, the same way it began falling apart. But here's the thing. I'm okay now. Actually, I'm more than okay. I've started going to therapy. I reconnected with people I lost touch with. I'm learning how to be alone without feeling lonely. And for the first time in years, I'm waking up without that tightness in my chest. I'm not defined by her choices anymore. I'm defined by what I chose after. Walking away wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing I've ever done. So if you're still reading this and you've ever felt small, replaceable, or invisible in your own relationship, I promise you, you're not. You're allowed to want more. And you're allowed to leave when someone stops seeing your worth. Thank you for listening. Wendell, now it's your turn. Tell us in the comments. What's a historical event that completely changed the course of someone's life, but most people barely talk about? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This has been another story from Reddit Confessions, where every ending has its own beginning.